And the more and more we learn about each other, the better it is, because then we kind of share that brunt of what it means to suffer, right? And we want to make it easier for the next generation, which is why I appreciate what you're trying to do. Again, be thankful for what you have. Be happy that you're having this opportunity to go through what you get to go through. Don't sweat the small stuff. I think it's healthy. I try to always think about it myself, to be like, okay, what if my last moments are closer than I think it is? How are my relationships with the individuals that I care about? What kind of legacy am I going to leave behind?
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the All of You podcast, where we sit down with all of you. Before we begin today's episode, we are going to insert a quick trigger warning. We will be discussing topics related to severe mental health challenges, including suicidal ideation. We believe that it is imperative that we are able to talk about these things openly, even in a professional landscape. A 2024 survey by the Government of Canada states that every year, approximately 4,500 people die by suicide across the country. This is the equivalent to 12 people dying by suicide every single day. It goes without saying that our mental health is not miraculously improved the second we walk through the doors of our workplace. In fact, it might get worse. If you're struggling, we hope that this will let you see and hear that you are not alone. Do not struggle in silence. We strongly encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional through your local emergency department, or contact a suicide prevention hotline. For those in Canada, that number is 1-833-456-4566, or text 45645. Olive Branch Mentorship Incorporated is a strong advocate for mental health support in the workplace. And the All of You podcast is here to support those of you who are navigating through tough times at work, especially when it comes to keeping your shit together there. Your overall well-being matters to us. We hope you take something meaningful away from this episode. And as always, take care of yourself first. And today we are extending the olive branch to someone that I don't think was ever on my radar as someone that I would be sitting down with on this podcast so early into this experience. But Jeff Pimentel, is that how you pronounce your last name, Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeff Pimentel.
Thanks.
Welcome to the All of You podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Now, the reason why I'm excited to have Jeff here is because he and I met in an unusual circumstance. Do you want to tell the story of how we met?
You can go ahead. I want to kind of see what your perspective is on it.
All right. So this was I want to say it was a Monday morning. Was it a Monday morning?
I believe it was Monday.
It was a Monday morning. I was running errands. I had been out and about running errands, had been to FedEx and had been to the grocery store and to the bank. And I was stopping off at the post office to pick up my Amazon packages, as I do. And I was standing in line at the post office, and there was a series of things that had kind of happened in the morning. I was going through a little bit of a thing at work and was waiting on some emails to come through. And as I was standing in line at the post office, a couple of emails came through. And, normally anybody could just open up their phone and, read an email that comes through. But unfortunately, the nature of the email that came through elicited a little bit of an emotional response, I guess. And I started to feel my heart rate increase, and I started to feel hotness, come over my head and my ears. And I'm in line at the post office. I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like, I can't have this happen while I'm at the post office. And I was just parked right out front. So I'm like, I'm just going to go out into my car, deep breathing, whatever I was going to do to try to de-escalate myself. And, as I, ran out, I think I had already maybe handed over my ID. I think I'd already given my ID to the girls at the desk, and I could tell that, this panic attack was coming on. And so I ran out to the street, and I recently got a new vehicle, and I don't know how to use the new vehicle very well. And the remote start started making the car alarm go off. Yeah. And I had my dogs in the back seat because I was running in for 3 seconds. The windows were fully down in the back, but not in the front, just a crack in the front. And I thought, crap, the, car is going off. I thought if I threw my keys inside the car that it would make the alarm go off, not press a button. I'm in the middle of, flight or fight mode. And so I just threw my keys into the car thinking that would get it to stop, but it didn't. And it just kept beeping and beeping and beeping. And I'm full blown hyperventilating at this point. And this woman parked behind me and she walked up to me, and when somebody asks you if you're okay, that just totally was not, it's lovely that she asked, but as soon as somebody asks you if you're okay and you're not okay, it was just the breaking point for me. And I burst into tears and I was freaking out that the car wouldn't turn on or turn off. And so I just, don't ask me how, but I jumped up onto the back door because it was all locked for whatever reason. I don't know why the car was locked, but I jumped into the back seat with my dogs and managed to somehow get into the front, grab the keys, and then the car stopped beeping. But I'm now hyperventilating, sobbing uncontrollably, could not catch my breath, could not anything. And then you and one of your coworkers walks out.
Yeah.
And how was that for you? You can be very honest.
I wasn't sure what I was gonna see really, just because they said.
Well, what did they say to you?
They said, "Can you come out here? There's someone who's panicking right now, and we just need to be able to help her out." Mm-hmm. So I said, "Okay," we went out. Once I saw you, I was like, "Okay, what's up? What's going on?" At first, I didn't know what to expect. We get all kinds of folks there who
at the post office, who
have issues, and we've had several people have panic attacks. Mm-hmm. So it's okay, well, what's going on here? Seeing you in the vehicle, I was like, okay, so everything kind of looks okay. What's going on?
But did you hear the beep,
I heard the horn going off. Okay. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. Why is it not turning off?
Because it was going off for a while.
A minute, yeah.
And part of me felt a little bad because we didn't go out to see what was going on.
Cars alarms go off all the time,
but
right?
It was for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, okay, whatever it is, something's going on. Her coming in, saying all that. I'm like, oh shit. Then we, let's go see. Yeah. And then once I saw you, I can tell you were just trying to stay away from any kind of unnecessary distractions. You were just like, I need to focus. Mm-hmm. My coworker started saying some things. I'm like, whoa, hold on. Let's not go down that route. Let's just get you to do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And then when you were talking about wanting to come out here, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know how serious.
Well, remember I was saying I can't drive. I literally live, I just have to turn the corner, and I felt my hands were vibrating. My feet were my legs up into my feet were vibrating. I just kept saying I just need to get home. I just need to get medicine. I don't carry my anti-anxiety medicine with me. I hadn't had this type of panic attack. I had this type of panic attack once before at the end of April of this year. So in my entire life, I've had a generalized anxiety disorder my entire life. And I had thought that I knew what a panic attack was. I thought I knew. But in April when this happened, I thought I was having a stroke. I thought something serious was happening because of how scary it was. And then when it started happening to me again, I was like, do I have to start carrying drugs with me now wherever I go? Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But in the moment I was saying to you, I can't even turn the corner to get home.
That was basically my concern is, okay, if you're in your vehicle and something happens, how are we going to react to it? Yeah. So just tried to get you, well, you did your thing. You tried to calm yourself down, really. Mm-hmm. And then I just met you outside here. Yeah. It
was probably, I don't know, how long were we standing there?
I don't know.
5 to 10 minutes, maybe, I would think. 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. And I was still not speaking, we're just having a conversation right now.
Totally different person.
I can speak very clearly to you right now. Yeah. And I could not speak. I couldn't formulate words without,
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've had a panic attack a couple times. And I totally get the feeling where it's just like you're not able to kind of
you can't regulate anything. Like your like everything biologically just feels like it's malfunctioning. Yeah. And so you so very kindly offered to meet me outside. I'd said like I'm at, and you very kindly met me, and I said, I'm going to go upstairs and get my pills. Can you please, just so that I had somebody with eyes on me. Like I just wanted somebody with eyes on me to get the stupid pill into my mouth. And because again, this is only the second time this has ever happened to me this severely. So I just, whatever, didn't want to have a heart attack or something. This is a fear that I have. I have major health anxiety, like strokes, heart attacks, brain tumors. Like I think I have all of them all the time. Anyways, I brought the pills down and I'm like, can you please just whatever I was saying to you, I don't even remember. Just please give me one pill in my hand.
You didn't want to risk
I didn't want to spill them all over the place. And anyways, you issued me a 1 milligram tablet of the pill that I needed. And I would say you stood with me there again for about another 10 minutes or so while it I don't know, sunk in.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. And we started talking about the podcast.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is getting more interesting. I'm like, okay, keep going. What's going on?
Yeah, well,
I wanted
like you were just trying to connect with me, I think, on a human level. And you were like, what were you up to today? Like, what's the deal? And I don't know. I started getting into like how brilliant I think young people are. I was saying, I think young people are going to change the world. And
I will never forget that because I was like, look at her, it's good.
Oh, it's making me kind of feel a little bit tearful actually thinking about it. But you are so kind. Oh my God, are you going to cry too? Are we both crying right now? Anyways, that was a very, 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 very human experience.
Yeah.
Like very human experience that you and I had on my front stair outside of the post office. Like, it
was a good day.
It was a good day. Yeah, it was a good day. And then, I finally got back into my home and I had, time to sort of reflect on what had happened and why it happened. And, we were filming a podcast episode that day. I had an Emerge nurse come, and her episode is actually going to air after your episode, but stay tuned for that. She was coming that day and she's written a book and I was just so excited to have her on. And there was, just all of this pressure of, whatever was going to happen that day. And after I had the chance to kind of de-escalate and I think it was later in the afternoon or later in the day, I went on to social media and I said you should follow the podcast, and sure enough you had followed the podcast. I think you followed the podcast. Myself, did you follow the not-for-profit too? I can't remember now, but
I would try to look at the whole package.
The whole scope of everything. Anyways, and then I looked at your Instagram. First of all, I realized that you're like part of this community. You don't live in this area, but
I do actually.
Outside of this area? Where do you live? Let's talk about that. Where do you live?
Down the street.
Just down the street from this area. And so did you grow up in this area?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah?
I was born in Toronto, but then moved here really young.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. Does your family live in this area?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And so your connection here was kind of intriguing to me. And then I also realized that as part of your Instagram, what is it called? Like your bio or whatever, that you have some intriguing sort of career paths that you've taken. And then when I did a little bit of a deeper dive, you're a bit of a yogi and a musician and you play a musical instrument. And I just thought to myself, this experience that I had with this human should be something that I talk about, because I think that, as you say, you've had people come into the post office who've had panic attacks before, people who are in mental health crisis or people who are, whatever. And you can't stop where these things are going to happen. You can't prevent, these human experiences, these human emotions, these human whatever circumstances from happening. And it's just so funny sometimes how the people who come into your life, you could actually, find some sort of a connection to that human. And so when I saw kind of the career trajectory that Jeff has had, I was like, I have to talk to this person more, because what is in your bio? Like, how would you describe yourself on your Instagram bio? Like, you have death doula?
End-Of-Life Doula.
End-Of-Life Doula?
Yeah, musician. Artist. Father.
Yes. And Jeff's also done some work with funeral homes. So when I picked up on the End-Of-Life Doula, I was like, I got to talk to him more about this, because if I just had this incredible human experience with this person, and he has these human experiences with people, and I've grown up in healthcare for 24 years. I've worked in healthcare and had many experiences with people at their end of their life. You don't come across somebody who has such a normal, I don't want to use the word normal because what's normal anyway, but who has a perspective on death that's maybe similar to my perspective on death. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
perhaps.
Well, we haven't gotten into it yet, but my perspective on death is that we don't know, like, the conversation about losing someone is very difficult to go through. The conversation about being diagnosed and then, talking to people about a terminal diagnosis is something that's very taboo. And we celebrate birth, we celebrate coming into the world, but we don't have the same views, at least in our culture, in North American culture. We don't have the same sort of celebration or focus Well, I mean, first of all, how many times have you done this with somebody? Like, do you know how many times you've helped someone go through their end of life experience?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't.
But it's a lot.
Yeah. It's a fair bit. Over a couple dozen.
Over a couple dozen? Okay. Yeah. And so what was it that drew you to becoming an end-of-life doula? How does that even happen?
My mom actually had a lot of influence on that. She would always take care of people within the community. Whenever something was happening, she'd visit them.
Through the church or just?
Typically through the church, right? So she'd do some praying with them. She would bring them food, comfort them, whatever, right? So I started to kind of see that, and more and more folks that I started to know started to get sick. So I always felt that they could deserve a little bit of attention, maybe, someone just to kind of talk to outside of their own family, who can come in without having too much of an emotional attachment, who can let them have their emotional moment without feeling bad about it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it started. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I met some folks and they're like, "You're a death doula." I'm like, "What?"
And I thought that it was very interesting because our connection was, at least in my mind, I was thinking, being the project manager of the morgue, I've had many, 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 many interactions with families who are having that last experience with their loved one. And then, the conversations that are had after somebody passes away. I have noticed, when somebody passes away in the hospital, how impersonal, I guess, sometimes it can seem, and how, especially during COVID times, there was times when, people would be dying and we weren't even allowed to let the family come in and be with the person when they were dying. And, how deeply I struggled with having to make those decisions.
That was tough for a lot of folks.
Oh my gosh. And, how many people there are who do die alone.
Yeah.
It's remarkable to me how many people die alone with no one.
Yeah.
So I think, this whole concept of an end of life doula, did you have to take training? Like, did you take a certificate?
So I paired up with some folks in the States. They had been running a program for a while.
Okay.
Went through them. It had to kind of translate everything to understand our medical field a little bit more, and just how our hospices and everything work. But yeah, I did my training with them. And then from there, it kept evolving, because there is a fair bit to know in terms of, okay, how do you explore this idea of death in other cultures? What do they do? which is why I became a funeral director after the fact, because eventually I started talking with the BAO, the Bereavement Authority of
I know
Ontario.
them well, yeah.
So, yeah. And they had suggested, just because of how close I was starting to get with folks, they're like, if this is what your goal is, because my whole thing is I want to take care of the person while they're alive, but I also would like the opportunity to transfer them and then bring them to their final resting spot. So at that point, that's when they're like, just to save yourself a little bit of potential hassle, depending on where things go, get your license and then see where it goes.
What do you have to do to get a license to be a funeral director?
So here in Ontario, you go to Humber.
Okay.
And then it's about a 3-year by the time you finally get your full license, right? You have to do a little bit of portion at school, obviously. And then you have
do
to
a placement?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, did that.
3 years. Okay. Wow. And in terms of funeral director, did you ever have to do body releases from the hospital?
Yes.
Yeah. And what in your opinion, like when you go to a morgue and do a body release, what is that experience like? Here, let me reframe my question. Do you find a morgue to be a good place for a family member or a loved one to see their, person after they've been through something in the hospital and they've died? Do you think a morgue is a good place for them to see their loved one?
No, probably not.
Why? Why do you think that? I agree with you, but I'm curious to know why you think that.
Because there are other folks in there as well. So there's
sometimes lots of other deceased people.
Yeah. So it's definitely not the most comfortable thing. And I think you take away from that personal touch, right?
And the viewing rooms in hospitals, like any hospital you've ever done a body release, do they have a decent viewing room or anything?
Again, it's very clinical, so it doesn't, it just has this particular feel, let's say.
It's very cold.
Yes.
Well, the morgue is cold. They have to keep it cold.
But sanitized, and it just doesn't feel like, and it should be, but if you're trying to make that connection with an individual, then it's not always so comforting. It's not comforting.
No, it's not. Yeah. And then, how do you say that to the family? Like, well, you don't want to see what they just want to see their loved one. And, it's hard to...
They get distracted. For them, that's the only thing they're thinking about.
Yeah. I've had many times when I've had to, coach the family to say, you want the last time you see your loved one to be in a place where you feel comforted and safe and, like warm. And like, this is not, it's a very sterile, very, like, as you say, very clinical environment. And when, there's potentially other bodies in the morgue, right?
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to do a body pickup from a tragic death, or like how I guess I could just say this, like from a homicide or a suicide or anything like that?
No. Okay. Obviously, we still see them, but
you still see them after the fact.
Yeah, but never from the particular scene. No.
Is there any particular type of circumstance that you can recall off the top of your head where it made you feel like we're doing something wrong in North American culture with how we deal with death? Like, are there circumstances that come to your mind when you think about how we in North American culture deal with death? How, our morgues are so clinical, and how, people dying in community versus people dying in hospital. Like, is there anything that comes to your mind when you think how we deal with death currently that we could be doing better?
Yeah, tons.
Well, let's talk about it. What do you think? Like, what stands out to you as being the most important?
We sometimes fabricate this lie of how much time we want to give people. And, it's a business. So for them, they definitely want it. And if they're busy, they have to schedule things. So there is sometimes this idea of, even though they might say, take as much time as you want, they're also like, okay, when's the next family going to be coming in?
How much does the average funeral cost?
Boy, so easily 7,000 to 8,000.
Just for like a basic thing, right?
Very basic, very basic. I was actually talking to my parents yesterday, and they want to pre-plan for our family.
Good for them.
Yeah, which is actually a really good thing to do, just because of the inflation costs and everything like that. But
it's also an incredible thing to do for your family, so that when your family is grieving and sad for your loss, that they're not like, your family is not then having to plan how to bury you. Like, it's already done for the family.
I like that part of it, because it's, here's what my wishes are. This is what I would like.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have seen some cases where someone comes along and they're like, okay, this person wants a very, big traditional type of funeral, and then they flip it and they're like, just a cremation.
Oh, right. And that can be considered financial abuse of power of attorney.
Yeah, there's so many things wrong with that part of it. Again, it's just that, where are we? Why can't that stick? And where does the power lie? Thankfully, I haven't had to experience that. A whole lot.
What about how many people come to you who don't have a plan? Like, it's incredible that your parents are being proactive, but would you say that there's a certain percentage of people who come in when they've lost someone and they're like, we have no idea what they want. We have no idea. We never talked about it.
And that's generally the case. So usually that's what you'll run into, is a lot of folks will come in and they just want to know, okay, what do I do? They're trying to put it together themselves, and they want to be respectful to the individual and the rest of the family as well. And there's a lot of, okay, well, what is this going to look like in the public eye? Right? There's so much stress around that, which I think sometimes puts people in a position to sometimes go bigger than they need to, which is nice, because then you can simplify things for them and just be like, look, this is the path. This is all you need to really worry about. Don't try to make it too big. Bring it down. Because
it's really for you. It's not for the person who's passed. Like, the person who's passed is passed. So whatever it is you're pulling together for
all the survivors.
Yeah. I was thinking of something and then it just flew out of my brain, but I wanted to ask you more about what else you think we could be doing to normalize the conversation around death. Like, when your parents brought it up to you, you were at Thanksgiving dinner, I'm sure. Yeah. And it was, we're talking about when we die. And I don't think that the average, and correct me if I'm wrong, audience, but like, ask yourself, how many of you, or have you had a conversation with the people who are the closest to you, first of all, about what you would want or what they would want? And I don't think that production's being silly saying she has. But I don't think that the vast majority of people do.
No. Because it's so fearful to be like, that's the end. That's going to be the end of my thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Even my brother and my dad, they were both like, this is going to be the last time we talk about it,
yeah,
right?
Would we ever have to bring this up again? Yeah. And that's the whole sort of vibe of what I'm trying to push here in this setting and on this podcast, is like getting comfortable talking about the uncomfortable, because there's so much uncomfortable happening in society and politically and economically and environmentally. And it's like, there are so many things happening that we just don't talk about. It's 10 purple elephants in any room, and we just ignore the purple elephants and just wait until we're in a crisis, and then we're making decisions in a crisis, or we're making decisions grieving, or we're making decisions, heartbroken or whatever. And you don't necessarily make the most clear, well thought out decisions when you're in crisis or grieving. Or
I think it's healthy. I try to always think about it myself, to be like, okay, what if my last moments are closer than I think it is? How are my relationships with the individuals that I care about? What kind of legacy am I going to leave behind? And it's not to become morbid about anything, but you have to wake up and you have to be able to be like, okay, try and give this everything I can. And like you're saying, there's so many things that are like plaguing us.
plaguing humanity, not necessarily each one of us, but there's things that we're going through as a human collective that.
Yeah. And the more and more we learn about each other, the better it is, because then we kind of share that brunt of what it means to suffer. Right. And we want to make it easier for the next generation, which is why I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think my whole thing is trying to get people to appreciate the time they have. So, the pre-planning is great. Get that done. Get that out of the way. You don't have to worry about it. But now it's like focus on fostering those relationships as best as you can, because you want those people to miss you, I think. Right?
Well, you hope that your people miss you. And that's, I think, I'm sure if you've listened to the podcasts that we've already aired, you know that I've experienced some pretty significant loss in my life. I've experienced loss that I knew was coming and loss that I did not know was coming. What do you think is more difficult for a person to go through? A loss where they anticipate, so their loved one's been diagnosed with a terminal disease and they have all this time, to prepare? Or do you think somebody going through a sudden loss, unexpected loss, do you think it's harder?
I'm sure
one or the other?
It does still share its same amount of grief to some degree, but obviously a tragic loss, something more sudden, but that can look different for everyone, because if a mother loses her child, you can prepare for that for
I can't
months.
Remember if I've talked about this yet, but I've so many times when I've walked into a situation in recess in the emerge or in the ICU, and you hear that blood curdling scream, like the scream when a mother's lost, when a woman's lost their husband or when a mother's lost their child. There's just nothing quite like that, like guttural, like it's a scream that you don't forget.
I've been at cemeteries with moms.
Oh yeah.
In the middle of the night to be like, I know you have to go home. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This, you have other kids maybe.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, you can see just how much it can hit someone and they don't want to let go.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Either aspect, I think. I don't think if you really love the person, that's gonna weigh the same way, whether it's instant or even through a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I try. So for myself as an end-of-life doula, I try to take the opportunity to be like, okay, well, if we have some time, then let's work on that. That's where I really try to connect with the individual and their families, their loved ones, to be like, okay, how can we kind of go through this together and at least try our best to prepare for that?
Yeah.
Again, it's not always perfect. You're always going to have people who are going to struggle, but at least there's time, and hopefully people take that opportunity to talk about it, and then it can make it a little bit easier, right? This idea of, okay, well, how are you going to go on without me? And then hopefully you can make some kind of connection and let that person go on with this idea that you still do live on with them. I think we're all energy and
yeah.
So
I totally believe with that too. Speaking of that, my father died from Lou Gehrig's disease. He had ALS, and he was sick for 4.5 years. And the day that he died, I was living in Toronto at the time. I lived in Toronto for 10 years. My family was in Sarnia. And so the night that he died, I get a call from my sister, he's died. And so I'm, getting ready to, go to Sarnia to finally deal with this thing. And I had felt like I had kind of failed my parents, and I'll tell you why. So when we were walking into the funeral home that morning, like his body got picked up from the house, brought, to the morgue at the hospital in Sarnia. My mom asked me if I wanted to see him in the morgue, and I was like, no, no. I know what that's going to be like, and I don't need that. He was already a shell of himself anyway. He had been sick for 4.5 years. He weighed all of like 90 pounds or something, and he had nothing but like the teeny tiniest little use of his pinky. So it wasn't how I wanted to remember him. But when we were walking into the funeral home the next morning, I said to her, like, so what did he want? And she was like, I don't know. And I paused for a moment and I thought to myself, how are we going into this? And he's been sick for this long. And I didn't bring it up. And you guys were the loves of each other's life. And you didn't talk about this. And I tried to go about the conversation sensitively, right? But I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you didn't know what he wanted? She's like, well, we tried to talk about it a couple of times, but it just made us so sad that we just changed the subject and we moved on from the conversation. And I'm, like the clinician social work brain in me was like, what? Like how did this happen? How did we get this far? And we didn't talk about what he wanted. And he and I had some pretty profound conversations too. Like he couldn't speak anymore, but we texted a lot. The ALS Society had set us up with this really cool system where he could type with his eyes, like a retina display, like awesome. Reader thing. Wow. And so he could type and then it would speak whatever he was typing. So he could type with me on text message and stuff. So a lot of our conversations in the last 2 years of his life were all text. Anyways, and so as we're walking into the funeral home, there's an advertisement for putting your loved one's cremated remains into the base of a tree. Mm-hmm. And as soon as she saw this advertisement, she was like, this is what he would want. This is what he would want. He would want, we already knew he wanted to be cremated. I think that had been decided that he was going to be cremated, but nothing else. Like not if he wanted an actual funeral or like a luncheon or celebrate, like there was no conversation about that. And so when she saw this advertisement, she was like, this is what we're doing. We're putting his cremated remains into the base of the tree. And then we're going to plant this tree up at the family cottage so that whenever we go to the cottage, and that was his like favorite place to be and where they had their honeymoon and whatever. And I think it was a maple tree. I think you could choose like what kind of tree you wanted it to be. And I don't know. Anyways, this didn't even register to me as something that you could even do. But, when did he die? 2016 he died? Are there, do you know, are there any more advancements to this? Like, are there any other unique ways that people, commemorate their loved one in a way that's not a casket or an urn? There are some changes. They use water, but it's similar to the cremation process where what you get back is bone fragments. Oh, okay. It's just much more pure. It doesn't go through the fire. It goes through water instead, which is kind of neat. Mm-hmm. They haven't really started a whole lot of that in Ontario just yet, just because it's very, very new. Yeah. But yeah, the people are trying to get creative, the think outside the box, right? Right. So they're slowly trying to lean into that a little bit more. The funeral industry has always been safe, but now you have people who are... I'm looking at your tattoos because I've heard that you can like have somebody's tattoos preserved. Yeah, you can... that. Yes. Have you heard of not this? So much. No, here. Not in North America. No, not anything that I've heard locally, but I have seen some stuff. I've seen that you can like skin, like cut the part of the tattoo and have it like preserved in a frame or something. Yeah. Wild. Yeah, I would like that, but I'm sure I would love my rooster. Probably, I would love that. But so my father was cremated. We all. So I'll just tell you a little bit of a story. I had planned to go to Thailand. I had this whole trip planned and I talked to my dad about it. He had never done a lot of traveling, but I was I was traveling all the time. And I had this trip planned to Thailand for probably 6 months before he died. And I had just seen him, the weekend before. It was his birthday. And we were talking about Thailand. I had converted all of my money to like Thai money and so he died on a Sunday and I was supposed to fly out to Thailand on the Thursday night. And I was ready to cancel my trip. And I was like, I'm not going to Thailand. This is, absolutely not. And my stepmom was like, no, he would want you to go to Thailand. This is happening. We're going to do the funeral on Wednesday and you can leave for Thailand on Thursday. And at the time I was like, okay, like, I think I did kind of look into what my cancellation was. I was going to lose out on a lot of money. And like, I don't think I necessarily realized how much I was grieving, because you go through, the motions in the funeral, and 75 lasagnas get brought to your house, and, you go through this process with people, and I was distracted. Right. Mm-hmm. And the trip to Thailand is a long flight. Like, I had a long layover in Shanghai and whatever. And, so I brought a backpack with me, and I had my little bag of my dad's cremated remains in my bag.
Nice.
And wouldn't you know, but in Shanghai, they confiscated my nail polish, but not the human remains.
At least. Did they see it and ask you about it and everything? Oh,
I had human remains in my backpack.
Did you have any documentation with you?
None.
Oh, okay.
Nothing. Just human. And this was a on-the-fly decision that I made, where I was like, I'm going to bring him with me. I'm going to bring him with me. And it, like, no word of a lie, he's in my bedside table in a little box. Like, no word of a lie, I brought fresh dead human remains in my backpack to Thailand. And I sprinkled a little bit of them in the ocean, and I did a bunch of meditation with monks, and I did yoga excursions and stuff in the different islands while I was there, but not before going through a horrendous adjustment. Like, when I landed in Bangkok, it all hit me that I was there by myself and I was grieving my dad. And I called my stepmom, and I was pissed at her for letting me come. I was like, why did you make me do this? I'm so sad. And I don't know because I was there by myself. Like, trying to navigate this huge city. And I had thought I had done all my research really well. And I was having a hard time getting around, and the language barrier sucked. And I was just so sad to be there and not be with my family. And, I had my dad, like a Ziploc baggie of my dad,
Were you at least able to slow down the whole process when you took him to the ocean there?
Oh, yeah. So Bangkok sucked. I don't know if you've done much traveling in your life, but anyway. Bangkok is an enormous city, and I just find that every big city is the same. Like, every big city is difficult to navigate if you don't speak the language. But then once I got into the Southern Islands, like, I had to take a 1.5 day long trek to get to a boat to bring me to the Southern Islands. But once I got to the islands, I was able to chill, and I had a home base, and I had, I ended up meeting the Airbnb girl, and, she was really friendly, and I was able to sink into what was happening. And the moment, that I had with him, like with my Ziploc bag of my dad's remains, sprinkling a little bit of him in the ocean, and, having that moment, I think.
And that was something he kind of wanted to, or what?
He had never done a lot of traveling, but he was always really fascinated. Like, a lot of our conversations were around. We never talked about what I did for work. I don't think he cared. I'm sure he cared, but
you're doing well.
Yeah, you're fine. Like, he was a small town guy, so he didn't understand why I was in Toronto. Like, he didn't understand why I, was doing these things. But because I was his only child who was doing all of these, things. That was sort of our connecting point, was me telling him all the weird and wonderful, wacky things that I was up to. I didn't specifically say, hey, Dad, I'm going to bring you to Thailand with me. Like, I didn't have the chance to talk to him about that before. Right. But the fact that I was able to get his remains and bring them with me, that was, risky. I didn't even really think that it would be a problem. I don't know why I didn't think it would be. It wasn't a problem. They were more worried about my nail polish, for crying out loud.
But sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So that experience, and I've spoke to a few people about this, because it's like, I knew that he was dying for a long time. Like, I knew that he was dying. And my mom, like my stepmom, I remember her saying to a couple people that she thought his death was sudden. And I was like, his death was not, like, you would never say that to her. I would never say that to her, but it was like, it wasn't sudden. It was not sudden at all. We knew this was coming. Like, it's a degenerative disease. Like, he was going to succumb to his disease at the end of his life. But yeah, and sadly, she was diagnosed with cancer 6 months before he died. So we had 4.5 years of my dad being sick, and then we thought she was going to die, and then it was a long, long, very tragic journey with multiple cancers and multiple surgeries and 3 brain surgeries and bacterial meningitis on the brain. And so where I'm going with this long drawn out thing is I felt like I lost her so many times, because there were so many times where we thought it was going to be the end, and then she recovered.
Yeah.
She was in a coma during COVID for 3.5 weeks or something with a major brain infection. And when you think that they're on their deathbed, you go through these emotions of this is it. This is going to happen and it's going to be over now. And then she would recover.
Yeah.
And we went through that so many times. It's and we're, grateful that we had her for as long as we did, but at what cost? Because her quality of life just continued to, diminish and diminish and diminish. So do you have any thoughts or opinions on that around how we as society are now able to keep people alive because of all of the the pharmacological interventions and surgical interventions, and people are living longer, but do you feel that they're living well?
I think it's done with good intentions. Doesn't always turn out that way. Like you said, sometimes people are bedridden. The entire quality of life is completely gone. And then you're a shell of what you used to be. So there's a lot of discussion to be held around why. Mm-hmm. Who is that for? Right. And then you have something like maid services, which all of a sudden gives that individual a lot more to work with. And then it's so difficult for the rest of the family to understand why you're going to go that way. Right. Yeah. But it's you don't understand that person's suffering. Maybe they're just done and they'd rather still be who they are versus, less of themselves.
Yeah.
That comes up a lot too. And it's a very, very tough one. And you'll always have the family kind of fighting to say, no, don't do that. Don't do that. It's this sin or whatever. All of a sudden they'll turn to whatever it is that they want to say no.
Yeah. And the whole conversation with families too around making that decision for DNR and, the level of intervention that some people are comfortable with versus no, I want, my loved one to be full code. I had a situation a couple of years ago where it was an elderly man. He was in his 90s, 93 years old, severely demented, very severe cognitive impairment. His son was in his, mid to late 70s, and son could not let go, because his father was his best friend. His father was his only, anything. And despite the ICU doctor and everything, saying to him, we have to make some decisions at some point. His quality of life is so poor. I'll never forget that night hearing the code blue. I heard the room number and I knew who it was. And we were doing full court press on this nearly deceased man anyway, but we were just keeping him alive with drugs and machines and, But the son was he could not accept the finality of it. And they did CPR for probably over an hour, and he was gone. And the son, I remember the son collapsing, and the chaplain was there, and everything that they could have done. But at what point do you say, I don't want my father's last moments to be physically traumatic, in pain.
Yeah.
They're breaking this man's ribs.
Yeah.
They're, injecting him with all kinds of everything, to keep his heart beating and stuff. I don't think the average person really understands. Hello, everybody out there. I don't think the average person understands how traumatic that end of life resuscitation is.
Yeah. I think it's the idea of they love and they want to keep fighting for them, and you mean so much to me. Don't go anywhere. Stay here. I need you,
Yeah.
Which is beautiful, but we sometimes need to be able to really look at that and just understand, okay, in this idea of the cycle of life, this is going to happen to everybody.
Every single one of us. Every single one.
So we need to probably get a healthier relationship with what that process should be, can be, in order for less suffering to kind of happen. And that's in the individual who's dying, and also with the people who are around, so that we don't feel like we're missing out on something through the constantly wanting that person to recover, only to, like you said, you come back and you're not really the same person anyway.
Yeah.
So what are you fighting for, right? It's just so we can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. It's a hard conversation to have with a lot of folks.
It is. And it's, it's just a wonder to me why we don't have some public service announcement or some public education. Like, why is this not something that we teach people about in school? I didn't learn about this. I didn't learn about death in school, in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we learn, like, I think maybe you talk about, I'm just looking over at you. Did you learn about anything to do with death in public school, in high school? No? Do you have a class? One of our members of production today is in a police foundations course. Do you know if you have a class in police foundations around death, dying, and bereavement? No? It's not not in the curriculum? No, not in first year?
Eventually through victim services and all that, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So to have people within society, like the public and social services people who are involved in, those vulnerable moments in someone's life, you would think that police foundations would have death, dying, and bereavement. And no word of a lie, in the 10 years of whatever that I was in school, I think I only took one death, dying, and bereavement course.
Really?
One. And the only thing that really stands out to me from, the theory from that class was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. That's insane to me. It's insane to me.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. I think the more we take the time to think about it, the better we become, the stronger, if you will, because we fear it a lot, and you build your relationship with it, which makes you happier to be in this present moment. At least then you can realize, there's so many people that pass away every day. Even in this town we're in, it's 1,000 people a year. 1,000 people a year. At a minimum, it's 1,000 people a year in this city. So if you kind of think about, okay, well, it's the unlucky lottery, as I was telling my family, right? Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's anybody. But understanding to some degree that you will eventually come to an end, hopefully brings people better appreciation for the moment that they have, or other people's moments, right? So that this idea of, constantly being happy is not necessarily the goal, but take the opportunity to understand how important that is, whether it's for yourself or other people, to be like, yes, in this constant progress for people, that's important.
Yeah. Because
when you're down, then hopefully there's enough support there too to kind of help you or comfort you, right?
Yeah. Because you've already alluded to this, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, because a lot of people listening are of a younger generation, millennial, Gen Z. We do have, boomers and Gen X's who are listening as well. But do you have any advice for young people who maybe want to have this conversation with people who are important to them, like their parents, or even, their partner or whomever? Like, do you have any advice for somebody who's wanting to have this conversation, but maybe you don't know how to broach it? Like, you don't know how to...
Talking about the funeral is always the safest and easiest way, because everyone has to go through that eventually. So it's always, I think, the easiest way to kind of get in there, to be like, hey, what would you like? Right? If you're a couple, are you going to be doing the same thing? If you're going to be buried, are you going to be buried together? Or if one person's going to be cremated, what does that mean to you? And how does that kind of, relate to how you look at things in life, I think.
Yeah. And it's not in my opinion, it doesn't have to be, let's sit down at the kitchen table and get out a notebook and, write everything. I find that imagine just come on the podcast. Let's talk about how you want to die. No, I think it has to be when you're in a very natural environment. Like I had a lot of conversations with my mom when we would be driving because you don't have to make eye contact. You can, kind of.
It shouldn't be so planned.
It doesn't have to be planned.
Not like
it doesn't have to be a meeting. There doesn't have to be, lawyers involved. And that's even the whole concept of a living will too, right? Like being able to think about your own plan for yourself and having, the trust in someone or being able to write that down and tell someone where it is so that they can find it. I'm going to actually do a whole episode on experiences that I've had in healthcare. But one of the things that I did when I was managing the morgue was dealing with unclaimed bodies, like people that have no family and no next of kin or anything.
Yeah.
And the investigation that goes into trying to find someone is you have to call the police and you have to do an estate inquiry and you have to call the embassy and the consulate. Like there's a whole, through the Bereavement Authority of Ontario and through the Chief Coroner's Office, like you have to apply for a social services burial, but you can't just say like, this person died, can you bury them please? Like you have to show your due diligence to say that you did try to find, a loved one, or you did try to find next of kin. And, there was many times when I would be working with the police specifically, and it's like, can you find me a landlord? Can you find me, I don't know, was there ever a domestic dispute where there was a girlfriend who could, tell me about where this person's family lived? Or, there's just so many experiences that all of you and all of us and all of everyone are going through, and to be at the end of your life and not have anyone claim you. And, perhaps you went through a really traumatic, death in the hospital, and then you're just, left in the morgue for planning to take place for you. Like, this is why I guess I feel so strongly about there being more education and more normal conversation, just casual conversation about what that end of life experience is for the average person. Like I think everybody imagines that you're going to live until 87 and you're going to go to bed one night and you're going to have, this peaceful sleep and you're going to fall asleep having a beautiful dream about your life. But like, how many people die like that?
Yeah. If you're lucky, right? Like
most people, and please correct me, most people die in the midst of some physical health trauma or some sudden health trauma or some, you're diagnosed with this horrific disease and you've got X amount of time to live. No, not very many people. I'm not going to throw out a percentage, but I would say it's very, very few. Maybe 5% of people die 87, warm, cozy in your bed, and you just fall asleep and never wake up. Like, I don't think that there's that many people that die that way.
No.
Got to look that up. Fact check. Yeah.
No, you're right. It's, we see all kinds of different folks come in at different stages.
Yeah.
So it's definitely.
Have you ever been a part, sorry to interrupt, have you ever been a part of arranging a funeral for a child, like a young person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it
quite a bit?
Is it, like the reason why I'm asking this is because I was involved in a really tragic case in the hospital in the summer where a 15-year-old girl was run down by her pimp, and she didn't seek medical attention. She just, went to her her grandparents, and she died on their couch. And the lights and sirens and bring the body in, and we tried to revive her. And, while they're, doing their thing in recess, I'm looking the patient up, trying to see if I can find anything about the patient. And I discovered that she was actually sex trafficked, and she'd been followed by this sex trafficking program. And as I'm reading, it's like her father was incarcerated for murder. Her mother abandoned her at 2 years old. Her grandparents were doing the best they could to raise her. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, this young person was failed by the system so many times she was failed by the system. And now even in the end of her life, like even when she's taking her last breath, like we couldn't, at least I felt in that moment, like I couldn't do anything to protect her, or like, well, the one thing that I did do to protect her was protect her personal health information. Cause the detectives who showed up, they show up with their like guns in their, holster, and they're circling the nursing station, scoping things out, because before the coroner arrives, like we're not allowed to say anything to the detectives, right? They're not in the circle of care. They're not, they have to have a subpoena and warrant or whatever it is for us to give information out. And in this moment, like we just experienced this horrific loss. We've like shut down the recess. The body's still there. And it's like the detectives are now probing for information. Like, so what do you know? And other staff are, starting to say stuff to them. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. Like you can wait for the coroner. The rules. Like the fact that the detectives were pushing, they know the rules, and in that moment, I think I was struggling so much with how I felt the system had failed her. I was like, if the only thing that I can do right now is advocate for her, then that's what I'm going to do. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. And what was even more upsetting was her grandfather was brought in by the police. He had been doing chest compressions on her, and the detectives wouldn't let him go be over her body. Like he just wanted to like not lay on her body, but just like cry over her body, I guess. Yeah. And the detectives wouldn't let him touch her.
That's harsh.
And I'm like, he already he was already doing CPR. Like, I don't understand why he can't now. She's gone. Like his DNA is already on her. I don't understand why he can't.
Yeah.
So you know what I had to do? I literally had this, I would say he was probably 70 something. I had to literally go and hold this man up so that he would not touch her body while he was sobbing uncontrolled. And I'm crying now too. And like, we're all crying, and I'm holding this man up and just holding his arms away from her. All he wanted to do was hold her, and the detectives wouldn't let him.
Yeah. Well, as far as that goes, I don't know exactly what to say there, but like definitely
these are the experiences,
respecting a process.
Right?
Like you said, there should have been nothing wrong. He was already touching her.
And I tried to justify it with them, and they were like, nope, no contact with the body, no contact with the body.
Very strange. Very strange.
So strange to me. Yeah. And then maybe you know a little bit more about this than I do. Do you know much about the coroner process? Like, why is it that the coroner has to come in and examine the body before like anything can happen then next?
Well, just foul play anything that's not necessarily matching up with what's being recorded, right? There have been a lot of instances where someone will come in. Well, I shouldn't say I've found many instances, but you'll have your cause
of death or whatever. Yeah.
And then you all of a sudden notice something that wasn't possibly recorded, and then you bring that back, and it was just something that was overlooked, and they're like, oh yeah. So then it's like, okay, we have to redo this, because based on whatever it is that they're being told, they're like, yep, makes sense, easy enough. And then something got missed, whatever it was.
Yeah, she had bruises all over her body, and old bruises, you know what I mean? So I don't, maybe this is a morbid thing, but are you into true crime at all? Like, do you listen to true crime stuff at all?
So sometimes. Not a big fan, but
and listen, it's definitely sick. It's a sick obsession. Like I'll come across a certain case, and I'll just become hyper fixated, and I'll consume every possible ounce of content I can find on certain cases.
Some people love that stuff.
It's not healthy. I think they would say that that's actually a huge red flag of like psychopathy or something. I don't know, but when I'm listening to true crime, I don't think I'm necessarily listening to like the morbid component to it. In my mind, when I'm listening to it, I'm thinking about the human experience. Like, what made this person get to that point? Or like, what life experiences did they go through? What trauma did they experience? What in my mind, I'm trying to analyze all of the different sort of factors that would have come into play to bring that circumstance on.
How did we get here?
Yeah. The more of the how did we get here? Yeah, I guess. But I imagine the funerals that you have to facilitate, or maybe you've never had to facilitate or coordinate a funeral for somebody that's been murdered. I don't know. Have you ever?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a few times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And do you have to wait until you get the all clear from the coroner around what you do next with the body? With the
once
formaldehyde and all of that stuff, was they're released to the funeral home? That's
once they're released, typically we're fine. The only time where that kind of came up was during COVID. So that was a little weird. But besides that, once we get the release, then we're good to go to start the process of, reconstruction.
How long does it take usually to reconstruct a body?
Depending on what happened.
Oh,
so,
okay. Yeah.
Different things. You can get into the artistry part of it where you have to reconstruct the person's face, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that can all depends on what happens to the individual. But if you're just embalming someone, 45 to an hour and a half, depending on the individual. But
this is one thing. My best friend died in 2019. She died from an aortic aneurysm. She was 26 weeks pregnant. Sucks. Anyways, when I saw her embalmed in the casket, I was like, this doesn't look like you.
Yeah. It
just did not look like her. Like, she was so vibrant and, oh man, I'm going to cry again. Yeah. She was just such a vibrant, young person. And to see her in the casket, she maybe her family didn't choose a bright enough outfit or something, but I just felt like, I don't know.
There is something to embalming someone properly to kind of capture that soul, if you will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And they embalmed her with the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't know that it was a boy until we read the obituary that the funeral home wrote.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they wrote, and her unborn son.
That's a tough one.
So sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not my story to tell. I mean, I got the news in a Walmart parking lot, and the phone, I'll never forget that phone call. But it's like flying out there to be with her family in Nova Scotia and, what they had gone through, because her death was sudden and tragic and unexpected, and they were planning for a baby and, all of the things. And, that was what I was asking about earlier, is like when you lose somebody suddenly, tragically, versus, having the time to prepare for it, like losing her. And I think everybody who lost her, who was impacted by the loss of her, it was like, she was just one of the best, you know what I mean? Like one of the best people. And you ask yourself, like, why her? Like, why now at this time in her life?
Yeah. Like I say, it's that unlucky lottery. Like, how does this happen? How do certain individuals who are full of life, so many opportunities, so many things ahead of them?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just how life sometimes is. And we're supposed to be able to look at that as a society to be like, again, be thankful for what you have. Be happy that you're having this opportunity to go through what you get to go through. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
That always, this life that I live, that's always the hardest part for me, because sometimes I'll go and I'll sit with someone who feels bad to let me know how shitty they feel because they're dying.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
this is the time you're allowed to.
I'm like, you're okay. You're fine.
Yeah.
And then you have other people in the world who want to complain about, their toothache, whatever it is. And that's fine. I get it. But it's, again, this idea that we should be able to kind of build a little bit of ourselves by looking at something that is a little more difficult to talk about. And then hopefully that changes your internal part that lets you kind of look at life to be like, maybe I don't have to feel so bad about some of the smaller things. And then how do I spin that? How does that create that different dialogue within myself and the people around me so that I can appreciate a little bit more?
Yeah.
Rather than constantly just feeling like I have to take part of the conversation because everyone's talking about being negative. I want to talk about being negative.
On your soapbox, right? Yeah. Especially, and with social media being the way that it is, so many people have expressed their opinions and, whatever.
And we should. There's so many things, there's so many injustices that do happen, but that's what I'm talking about. We should more focus on that. Find your reason to put your energy into something where you're okay to speak up about someone else's rights or your rights if they're being violated, but we have to understand what that really looks like, rather than just feeling like a victim over some simple things.
Yeah.
Right?
You mentioned earlier that you believe that we are all energies and that, the human experience is, maybe a little bit of a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. So and you also mentioned the word legacy. So I kind of wanted to go back to that, because how do you think the experience is for somebody at the end of their life when they maybe feel like they haven't left their mark, like they feel like they haven't had the chance to tell their story, but now they're being told that they're going to die? Mm-hmm. And, how do we help people to still feel like what is happening is part of leaving their legacy? Like, I don't know how I'm trying to word this, but it's like your legacy doesn't need to be Martin Luther King or, like your legacy. Sometimes
it can be simple. Sometimes it's just as simple as a conversation I have with them, and I start to kind of find that thing. I have been part of a No One Dies Alone program where I go in, this person has no one, and they're just like, well, this is it. I don't know who you are, but thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And I try to go in a little deeper with them, and I try to find out, what is it that you enjoyed about your life? What are some of these great things? What have you ever taken part of that you really enjoyed? And then just letting them know how important that stuff is. And it's like you are actually part of a tribe of people. Maybe you never got to meet them, but there's so many people who feel and think like you.
Yeah.
So, letting them know that I appreciate that, whether or not they let me share their story, whatever the case is, but I try to remember them and I try to make them feel at least important in that particular strength that they have.
Yeah.
Finding whatever it is and then just letting them know, yes, that one particular piece of light that you are able to tap into, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's take a look and let's see where we can make this grow, and let's focus on that. And I try to, without making it too much, that becomes part of a regular conversation, and we explore what the depth of that thing might be. And my idea is to let them go into that.
Yeah. And,
let's create that vibration around this so that something gets remembered, even if it's just one person. If it's me, I get to share that story about this amazing light that this individual had. Right. And it motivates me too. Right. So then I go on, I help other people, whatever the case is. And then I have that particular person to thank. Right. So at least there's this idea that all of us have something important in us. Right?
All of us. Definitely. All of you. And I think that's really beautiful, because the coroner, the chief coroner's office, so when you go through that process of applying for a social services burial for somebody that doesn't have anybody, they actually send people from the coroner to be a part of the burial.
Yeah.
Like, so the person doesn't even get buried alone. Like, the coroner will send a small, couple people to the burial site.
That's part of a program actually I wanted to start tapping into, because again, I like the idea of taking care of folks in a different way. I know whenever I do my transfers, I always have a particular thing that I like to do. Usually it's just music.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll just play music, and if I know the person's family, I'll just ask them, what kind of music should I play? Or sometimes they'll even give me a whole playlist.
Oh, I love that.
And they'll be like, can you play, a couple songs here and there, depending on where we're going.
Yeah.
Or if I'm working on them, then...
Do you talk to them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good. Okay, good. Because I feel like I would totally...
I've been a funeral director in this city, so I get to work on a lot of work with a lot of individuals that I've known.
Yeah.
So it's I'm just as awkward with living as I am with the dead. It takes me a little bit of time to kind of warm up. And then once I'm like, well, you know, since I got you here, it's like,
since I got you here.
Yeah. And then we'll just, I just try to let them know something.
Yeah.
A couple times it's been pretty funny. I remember one time I was having such an emotional moment with this one guy, and I had his hand, and when I was bending the fingers and I'm like, you know what? He would probably say that right about now, because it was way too emotional for him. Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was so funny, and I'll never forget the guy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you believe in the spirit sort of staying with the body for a period of time after they pass? Or do you believe that once it's done, it's done? Like, how do you kind of view that?
I definitely see it as, we have this energy bubble around us, right? You are capable of affecting your environment to some degree. I have this weird radio trick that I do.
Okay.
With a Bluetooth radio. It's gotta be. So I figured out all the science, because I'm like, people are going to think I'm crazy.
No, there's gotta be science, right? Yeah.
So if you have a Bluetooth radio and it's about 40 feet from your device, like your phone, you can interact with the signal. Men, for some reason, do it one way. Women do it another way.
Wow.
So, and I've gotten so many people to kind of do this just because, I don't know, I'm curious. I'm still curious about it.
Yeah.
So you can actually stop the signal from coming in.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's like on demand, which is so unique.
That's amazing.
But I feel like that is us. We have this ability to radiate, right? So I think if you practice it in your life, you can have that kind of force. So it's like, okay, maybe you stick around a little bit, you know, your ego is going to be like, this is me. This is everything I've ever experienced in my life. And then I think at some point you're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm kind of energy. I'm kind of everything.
Yeah.
And here you go. Just release.
Dissipate.
And then, become part of the universe and all that stuff.
Yeah. I think I believe something very similar to that. And I think I do feel like the spirit hangs out for a bit. And the reason why I say that is because I wasn't with my stepmom when she passed in December. But I did go to the funeral, and it was sad, like a extremely, extremely sad funeral. Just, you know, there's some family dynamics that are very difficult. And I remember, you know, standing there, it's like something from a Hollywood movie. I'm standing there, my black Doc Martens and my long black trench coat and my black umbrella, and I'm standing it's raining, and you know, this speech is happening, and you know, the last words are said, and I'm walking back to my car crying, and then I get into the car and I just, you know, burst into tears, and I just felt this like warmth. I just felt this like, I felt like I was enveloped. I don't know how to explain it. I just felt in that moment, it was like she was there, or somebody was there. Something was there, some energy, something.
You ever feel like sometimes you get these little nudges that are like, what a weird little coincidence.
Constantly.
I feel that's the universe always trying to somehow very subtly to be like, look, here's how beautiful some things can be in the universe when you take the time, you pause, you pay attention. It's like there's something that's going to happen. Yeah. Right. And I think those are those moments. Yeah. Even though you're like, oh, it's just a coincidence, It's like, but
no, because that experience, that moment, that was when I made the decision that what I was going to do with OBM was going to change. And that moment, I don't remember exactly how it came, you know, into my mind, but I was like, I'm going to put so much good into the world. Like, I felt this warmth. I felt like I was so sad, and I was so heartbroken, and, you know, sobbing, you know, uncontrollably. But I just remember thinking, like, I'm going to put every ounce of energy that I have into putting positivity out into the world, because there's so much sadness and so much ugliness and so much hatred and so much whatever in our lives. And I just felt like in that moment, it was something switched in my brain. And I was like, my life needs to be dedicated to making sure that nobody ever feels alone, and nobody ever feels abandoned, and nobody ever feels neglected, and nobody ever feels, I think alone is the bottom line for me, is that I don't want anybody to ever feel like whatever it is that they're going through, that they have to go through it isolated, or that they have to go through it thinking that, you know, the emotions that they're experiencing are weird or unusual, or that they're unique to you. Because like, as humans, as we've clearly discussed, is like, we are all going through these journeys, and, you know, we all come to the end of our lives.
It's everyone's first kick at the can, from what I understand.
Exactly.
So
first
we're
time
all
at
gonna,
the rodeo. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, like there's something empowering about once you realize you're a part of a bigger thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always been spiritual. Like I don't necessarily identify as any particular religion. I guess I grew up Christian. You know, we went to a United Church sometimes growing up.
I was Catholic.
Yeah. So do you identify with any of that at all anymore? There's aspects of it that, I definitely see, okay, you know, why do we do certain things? What are the rituals and all that? What do they mean? What's the symbology? But no, not specifically like Catholic Church kind of stuff. Yeah. But the Catholic Church too is also very controversial. But yeah, spirituality. I just feel like there has to be something. There has to be something bigger than us. There has to be some divine something.
I love space. I love this idea of there's a whole other... A lot.
Space and the ocean are my two biggest fears.
Yeah, because it's like there's so much in there that we have no... And that's
apparently,
here.
Like space and the ocean, like the ocean could even go inside of the ocean, inside of the ocean, inside of the ocean. Like I don't know.
It's so much life out there.
So much life out there that we don't... that we have no understanding of. I do think about that all the time, actually. Just how we are, you know, these bags of bones and blood floating on a rock in the middle of this whatever universe, you know, and we're just this teeny tiny little like speck in the universe. And so when you have panic attack outside of the post office, it's like, what?
It's okay. You got this.
Yeah.
If we're going to be a spacefaring civilization, we definitely, you know, it's okay. Tap into it.
Actually, you know what? I wanted to actually, what generation do you identify with? Millennial, Gen X. Yeah, Gen X. Do you remember like the emo era? Obviously, you remember the emo era. Yeah. So when I had this panic at the post office, I was like, man, that would make a really good emo band name.
What? Panic at the
post office?
Panic at the Disco.
I know, but Panic at the post office
It'd still work.
Better. It's way better than Panic at the Disco. I'm trying to get a little bit better about making these episodes a little bit shorter. I'm sure we could probably talk for like 100 more hours. But there's a couple of segments that we do on the show that I want to make sure that we get to.
Sure.
So we have these talking point boxes. So one...
These make me nervous.
Really? Okay. So don't be nervous. It's not a live audience. Remember, we can edit anything. So one is generation, one is support, and the other one is resilience. What do you think?
Oh, man.
Generation, support, or resilience?
Let's try support.
Support. All right. There's a couple of categories. So one is strength and resilience, mindfulness, going deeper, getting to know you, or building connections.
Going deeper.
Going deeper is purple. That was purple. Yes. And then I will get you to choose one. So I'm going to ask you and then you're going to ask me.
Okay.
I'm going to choose building connections because that's what I'm supposed to be all about.
So what
Green.
color? Green?
Yeah.
Your favorite color is green, no?
I mean, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's not obvious. Okay, we'll put this back. Are you happy with your card?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
So what activity do you like doing with other people?
I don't really like people.
I'm a people.
Okay, let me clarify that. I am an introvert, and this
Same.
usually surprises people, but I love to be alone, and I love doing things alone. When I spend time with people, I require a lot of like decompression afterwards, like major sensory stimulation overload, and I feel very awkward and very weird in a lot of social situations, and I overthink everything I say and everything I do. And, you know, when I'm at family cottages sitting around the fire talking about death, like I question myself a lot of the time. So I don't do very well in large group situations. I can do it, but it's like my least favorite thing. If you were to say to me like, oh, do you want to go to this wedding where there's going to be 150 people there, or do you want to go for a hike with me in the woods? I'm going to be like, let's go for a hike in the woods. Like going to a wedding, you know, makes me want to rip my skin off.
You're definitely a strong introvert then.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah. And that's just the thing. Like, and you know, I think I do and it's masking, like it's all trauma. It's all things that I've, you know, developed and coping mechanisms that I've developed over the years. But things that I like to do with people, I like to do things with small groups of people or one-on-one with people. I really like being outdoors. I really like, I don't know, just one-on-one with people is my best. Like I'm the best in one-on-one circumstances. Like I hope one of my best friends is listening to this. Like she's a bit of a socialite in Toronto and an entrepreneur, and, you know, rolls in crowds with people who are just so not, you know, me, but she and I have a very close bond together, and we've been friends for, you know, my goodness, like nearly 15 years. But when her 40th birthday party came along, I know that I'm one of her best friends, and I know that I was supposed to go to this party, but like leading up to going to the party, I was overthinking and overanalyzing and over everything. That the day of the party, I didn't go because I had just dug myself into this like horrific overthinking, whatever. And I think to this day, I know she's forgiven me, but like, I don't think she'll ever forget that I didn't go to her 40th birthday party. But it was because I was just, what am I going to wear? And I know there's going to be, you know, photographers, and I know that I'm going to have to say a speech or something. And it's like, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. But if her and I could just spend the day together, then hands down, like I could do that any time. But so now she and I go to the spa together, or she and I go for tea together, or you know, so I had to explain to her, like, it's not that I didn't want to go. I wanted to go, but when it actually came time to going, I just couldn't. I was frozen. Like I just couldn't bring myself to go.
Did you end up celebrating with her anyway?
I did. Yeah. And our birthdays are close to each other, a couple of weeks apart from each other. So historically, we had always done something one-on-one with each other. So then when her 40th came along, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go to this 40th
big
birthday party. Liza, I love you dearly. And I hope that you're listening to this and you know how much I love you. And I'm sorry I didn't go to your party. But there's been so many situations like that in my life where I'm a flake. Like I'm a flake. I'll cancel. And a lot of that has to do with like my mood, what side of the bed I woke up on, if I took my medication consistently that week. Like there's just so many things that contribute to my willingness to want to be around people. And I've been through a lot of trauma and loss and abandonment and, you know, all kinds of things. So I also have a really hard time trusting people. So that's definitely not probably the answer you were expecting for that question. Like activity to do with people. I think it's very specific on who I'm with and what they like to do, and also what time of the year it is.
Are you like a people pleaser kind of thing? Yeah.
I think that I had been a people pleaser, but I'm trying to fix how much of myself I'm willing to abandoned to prioritize other people's needs, because for so many years of my life, it was just making sure that everybody else was comfortable, but forgetting what made me comfortable. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway.
No, I hear you.
I just like doing one-on-one things with people, and I get really overwhelmed, when a lot of people, want to talk to me and stuff. Like I did a speaking engagement in the summer in August, and I was invited, to do this keynote address or whatever. And I didn't prepare anything. Like I didn't write a speech. I didn't do anything. Oh. I just showed up.
Swing it.
I just winged it. Yeah. I just showed up, and I had a little bit of time to like chat with some people in the room, and there was a cue card, and I just wrote down like 5 points on a cue card, and then I stood up and just did my keynote address with a cue card.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all
because
right,
I felt like if I thought about it too much, that I would have canceled, and then I would not have gone.
How long was it?
I was like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something.
That's pretty good on the fly.
Yeah. But that's the same. Anyways, we're going off on it. I was just going to say that's the same as how I teach, because I don't prepare for my lectures either. Don't tell anyone that. But like I try not to overthink my lectures either, because and as you've seen, like I didn't prepare anything before this either. Yeah. Like I didn't write down any notes or anything. I'm just going through my Rolodex. So what do I like to do with people? Not a lot. I'm just afraid I'm going to disappoint them, or I don't know. Anyways, this is a really good one. Huh. What does unconditional love mean to you?
Oh, man.
You can think about it.
Well, that forever kind of love. That forever kind of love. Well, it doesn't matter what's going to come your way. You have a responsibility to give your heart to that individual in some kind of fashion, but no one is ever yours. Yeah. So it's like you still support them. And if you're willing to do that, then I feel like that's when it's like, yeah, that's the real type of love. You're not mine, but I want the best for you. So I'll support you in whatever way that looks like.
I love that. And it doesn't have to just be unconditional love with a romantic partner. It's like unconditional love with your children or your friends or Yeah,
think of my son in the same way, right?
How old is your son?
16.
Yeah.
So he's learning all kinds of things now.
I bet you're learning all kinds of things too.
He's a good soul, so I appreciate that part of it. And he's innocent. He's a young 16, let's just say, right? Yeah. So I can appreciate how he's learning and trying to feel things out and being sensitive, but still trying to be, this guy.
Yeah.
So that's tough. And then that's where I'm just like, I'm here for you. Let's talk as often as we can. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. And you're going to experience your life, hopefully, the way you want to.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Okay, one more segment.
Yeah.
So we do the olive in the pit.
Yes.
Oh, you know this.
I do know
you know this. So what was your olive for the week, and what was your pit?
It's the same. It's both sides of the spectrum. I made some great time to spend with some folks. Thank you guys for being here as well, making this happen. And just in work and everything, getting to know people a little bit more. I appreciated that part of it. I always do. And then on the flip side of that, sometimes I didn't make enough time for people. And I'm just like, nope, you don't get any more of my energy. You're cut off.
Yeah.
And it's tough because I definitely don't want to give any impression of me thinking I have stuff figured out and you can be all zen and everything, and that's the way you live a perfect life. I can't. I've never been able to sit in any type of religion to be like, I can do all those things that are, supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
So, sometimes when I feel like I can't give anyone else my energy, I do feel bad about it. But you kind of have to sometimes. You have to know when to make boundaries, right? So.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm just trying to think of what my olive in the pit was for this week. I don't know. I don't know what my olive in the pit has been for this week. I think there's a part of me that's really struggling with this, with the not-for-profit business, because like nobody is affected by OBM the same way that I am in terms of like the commitment to it. And I think the pit for me is, you know, not being able to effectively like communicate to the people around me, like how much I appreciate them. But then I'm also kind of grappling with this whole notion of like, this is my baby and I need to relinquish control and I need to let other people be involved with this, but they're not as committed as I am. And like, how much can you ask of people when you're not paying them? Like, this is something that I've really been grappling with this week, is like starting a not-for-profit is hard.
How long have you been?
6 months, 7 months.
Okay.
7 months. April 26th, we officially incorporated. This has been a thing for over like a year and a half. It's been a thing, but like we didn't officially incorporate until the end of April. So the podcast has only been since September. Like,
well, you're definitely making some good traction, I would think. No,
we are definitely, but I think that we could make it so much more. And
it will be.
I know. It will be. Anyway, so that's my pit. And my olive is this, because I've been looking forward to this. I think that it's really important to acknowledge, you know, when you have these kismet or like happenstance experiences happening in your life. I think a lot like what you were saying, I'm going to cry. He's going to cry. We're all going to cry. I think when you have these like human experiences that we often don't take enough time to pause and embrace them and acknowledge them. I'm a lot like you in, you know, going my way through life and trying to find these little glimmers, or like I look for angel numbers and I look for, you know, I'm in the right place at the right time because I saw this thing, or, you know, this sign, or I'm always kind of looking for signs. And, you know, I just think that it's not every day that you come across somebody at the post office who's willing to help you in a vulnerable time. And I think that, we as humans need to be willing to, we as humans, we need to be willing to extend the olive branch to each other, not only in good times, but also in vulnerable human times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so I appreciate that you were there that day, and your ladies at the post office who, my goodness, like I'm there so often.
They're good folks.
I'm there really so good often. Folks, like, I'm like, just here for my Amazon. Oh, Shannon's here again. And they roll out the big, you know, whatever. And all the podcast equipment and stuff was coming in. Like, oh my goodness.
I'm lucky to work at the post office. A lot of people have things to say about post office folks, but our team is pretty awesome. And
yeah.
It's nice because originally I was working in an office, and even though I wanted to work with End of Life, part of that was because I didn't want to go to work. I didn't like going into work, and people laughed at me a lot because of the things that I was trying to explore within my heart and all that. And I remember someone basically saying like, what, so you think you're going to go and sit with people who are dying and that's supposed to like make you money? And I'm like, I'm not doing it for money.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
That's something that I'm, you know, navigating with this too, is I have people ask me all the time, why are you doing this? Like, why are you starting why are you helping people? And I'm like, well, I can tell you, I'm sure as hell not doing this because I'm looking to become a millionaire. Like, I'm doing this because I see a problem. I see a solution. I think that the solution is an easy one, but what I am realizing is that there are so many restrictions put on us by the systems that exist that prevent us from being able to do things differently and think outside of the box, that, you know,
it's regimented. It's so regimented. So we need folks to be able to.
Is so regimented. And I just feel like the younger generation is starting to question some of that regimented everything. And I think that the younger generation needs a safe I think they just need a safe platform or I don't know, an accepting platform to feel comfortable. Again, I'm saying this corny thing, but it's like to be comfortable talking about the uncomfortable, because being a human is not getting easier.
Yeah.
It's not getting easier, even though we have all this technology and we're the most connected, but we're the most disconnected, we've ever been at the same time. It's like, I don't know.
There's a lot of demand on individuals, and that can get, very difficult for a person to be like, do I meet this? Do I not?
Yeah.
You were talking about that on some of the podcasts that you guys released today, this idea of where does our society stand and how do we then create that in generations, where it's like, oh man, we really have to step up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, this has been a slice. We could do this again. We haven't done any of this yet, but I'd be curious when this episode airs. It'll be in a couple of weeks from now. I'm wanting to give people who listen the opportunity to connect through like a virtual, like a Zoom. So what we are doing for a couple of the other guests is creating like an event thing that you can sign on through Zoom. And it's just like a 1 hour chit chat where we can bring up some of the things that came up in the podcast. Would you be interested in doing that?
I would love that.
Yeah.
Normally there's this thing, it's called the Death Cafe. So it's basically all it is you just have your tea and you kind of just talk about this idea of grieving, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a safe space just to let some stuff out,
Yeah. So I would love to do that with you.
Absolutely.
I think that would be amazing. We're the episode that we aired today, we're going to do one of those at the beginning of November. We've got all the ER nurse who's going to do a couple sessions. We've got our chief of women's mental health who's going to do a couple sessions. So I think your session would tie in kind of nicely with everything that's happening in November with our guests.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Awesome. So this isn't the end of Jeff Pimentel. And again, this is the All of You podcast, everybody. You know what to do. I'm getting better at this. Like and subscribe and follow and hit the bell notification. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. This is the All of You podcast, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.